Welcome to One Day in Transformation, the human side of global change. I'm Anthea.
And I'm Rainer, and today, for the first time in a while, we have an episode in English again instead of German. And it covers a topic that, at least for some companies, no longer seems to matter or has at least become an inconvenient one. But everybody and every organization desperately needs that. We're talking about equity, not equality, not diversity as a tick box, equity. The idea that fairness isn't about treating everyone the same, it's about giving people what they actually need to succeed.
Our guest today spent 28 years inside one of the world's most respected companies, Merck. Building their Global Diversity and Inclusion Center of Excellence, she rose to Vice President and Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, and then she retired. Not to slow down, but to change the game from the outside. She's a published author, a keynote speaker, and the founder of her own consultancy and a nonprofit dedicated to giving the next generation access to STEM education.
Her latest book is called The Truth About Equity. That title alone should tell everything about now and what she's working on. Celeste Warren, welcome to One Day in Transformation. Happy to have you here.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for taking the time. And I mean, this is quite an impressive career and a commitment. So the first question would go to what kept you there, and what point did you realize that the work you're doing is just not about HR, but transformation?
Well, I think what kept me going is just my upbringing. My father was the first Black teacher, first Black principal in our region. And so I grew up with a front row seat the importance of having equitable and fair practices through watching him and the discussions that he had with my mother. So it was always kind of ingrained in me. When I got into the role, the Chief Diversity Inclusion Officer role, it was through, trial and error. You implement certain things and you say, I don't know if that was going to work that well. And then you course correct. And so I would say probably not too long afterwards, understanding that I had a global strategy, that I needed to make sure that it was something that was relevant in each of the different countries, that Merck and MSD, as it's known outside of US and Canada, that it was something that people could implement and wrap their heads around, and it was relevant. Globally, I call it localization. Globally important, but locally relevant. It became very, very apparent that we had to think beyond representation. Do we have enough women? Do we have enough this? Do we have enough that? And think about it from the standpoint of how are we adding value to our employees and also to our business? And when I sort of changed the framework of how we're thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's when it became really important and relevant that this goes beyond just thinking about representation and people strategies, which are important, but it's thinking about how do we ensure that we have a holistic strategy that encompasses not just people, but culture, our business as well.
And absolutely impressive. Just knowing and understanding where that all resulted in and where that came from. But was there a moment maybe in your earlier stages of career where you felt that the weight of being the only person in a room with that topic was there?
Oh, yes. Yeah, very much. I can remember being in countless meetings, discussions, especially earlier on in my career, and even through my career as well, where you walk into a room for a meeting or a discussion, and it's this conference table, and you walk in, and all of a sudden, all the eyes, everyone stops talking, and they look at you, and the first thing that is going through their head is, why is she here? Did she knock on the wrong door? She's supposed to be somewhere else. And so they're about to tell me, yes, exactly. Oh, I think you want room such and such down the hall. But they're just kind of staring at. And then that automatically, as soon as you walk into the room, you feel like you don't belong. And so you sit down at a chair and they're still staring at you. And then all of the, when they realize that, okay, well, she's not getting up once the meeting starts, she's not getting up. So I guess she's here. Then then there starts to be the microaggressions, oh, well, she couldn't possibly know that much of what we're talking about. And not realizing that the reason why I'm in the room is because someone felt that I had value to the discussion, to what we're going to be talking about. And it took me a while, honestly, to really just say, I belong here and you need to see me and you need to value me. As you know, earlier on in my career, it was a little bit harder, but when I came into the rooms, I came into the rooms with a bit more confidence and understanding that, yes, I belong here. I have things to contribute. I have thoughts, creative ideas. I have innovative solutions. That's why I'm here. And that's what I'm going to bring to this discussion. And I'm not going to hold back. And so it took me a little bit to get there. But once I did get there, I definitely made sure that my voice was heard. And I walk in the room with a level of confidence that says, I belong in this room.
That's just amazing to hear. And I'm pretty sure that did shape the kind of leader you became then later on. But maybe you would like to share with us a bit, what was the first diversity, equity, inclusion initiative which you drove that genuinely surprised you, maybe with its impact in a positive way?
Well, it's so interesting. The first initiative when I got into that role was a misstep, but the unintended consequences were very positive. So I went into the role, and this would be, around 2013, 14, somewhere around then. I said, okay, let's do an analysis of the organization. And instead of doing a holistic analysis, my analysis simply was around looking at the people data and percentages. And really, because a lot of the data wasn't available outside of the United States, I was really looking at the data from the United States, trying to get data, whatever data that I had for outside of the United States. We had primarily gender data. And that was pretty much it. What I did was, I did that analysis and said, okay, we need to make sure that we reflect the diversity that we see, in the communities that we serve. And so that's kind of where the focus was, around the representation. The information that was provided was more U.S. based and more U.S. relevant. And so when I traveled around the world, was doing listening tours and talking with colleagues and leaders and employees, what they told me was, well, Celeste, some of that it's not relevant for us because, we're a small country. We don't have those levels within our country. Our country manager or country leader is at XYZ level. And so when I did the listening tour, really helped me and course correct. And this isn't something that I was in the role in the different countries. I'd say the words diversity and inclusion. And the hand would go up and they'd say, oh, well, don't bring those U.S. concepts here to this country. We don't have that type of a problem. That's a U.S. problem. And I would say, okay, so the first time I was at the countries, I would just listen. I was listening to what they were saying and realizing that they were talking about the challenges that they had, understanding that they were talking about problems with, in the people, in the different communities and other things. So went back to the drawing board, broadened the scope of the strategies. It included the challenges and obstacles that people are facing, understanding your culture And we, a lot of companies, most companies do culture surveys or engagement surveys, et cetera. So that information to understand what's going on. Then from a business perspective, understanding our business strategies and what's getting in the way of our customers and our patients being able to enjoy the products and the services that we provide. And then, so understanding there's certain groups of when you do the analysis, there's certain groups of customers that are not experiencing what we wanted them to experience. And so went back to the drawing board, took better part of 6 months or so to really create a global strategy that was more encompassing. And then once we had that strategy in place, around to different countries. And it was so funny because it's a year later. I'd say the words diversity and inclusion, the hand would go up again. And I'd say, well, let's have a conversation. And I would engage them in the conversation without saying those words. And I would say at the end, towards the end, you do know you're talking about diverse people with all different identities and the challenges that they face. You're talking about it from a social standpoint, a political standpoint, an economic standpoint, a class standpoint, talking about it in various different ways, your culture, et cetera, and your business. And so I said, in your country, every country, there's the haves and there are the have-nots. And that could be identified through its, maybe classism, colorism, gender, ableism, all different ways.
Right.
And so you need to understand who's in those categories in the have and the have-nots and try to close that gap. Then the second thing is from a cultural standpoint, and you look at your culture surveys and you'd say, is there some group of identity of people within your country that are experiencing the company's culture differently? And you find out by looking at the data from the survey, also talking to those people, because the data will say something, and then having a more focused conversation with people across the various different identities to find out what's going on. What are the emotions behind the data that you see in the survey? And then, we talk about their business as well. And so by the time I would leave the country, they had a much better view. And a global strategy that is locally relevant, you provide a framework and you basically say, in the people space, what do you need to be doing in your country? In the culture space, what does the data tell you that you need to be doing in your country? In the business space, what does the data tell you that you need to do to connect better with the customers? And so at that point, the global strategy became locally relevant because there was something that each of them could be doing in that framework. So we provided a strategic framework as opposed to here's what you need to do in your country, because your country better than, somebody coming from, New Jersey in the United States.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you. So I want us to get a bit personal here, if that's okay. You didn't just build a D&I program at Merck, you built something that lasted you. So what does it feel like to leave an institution after nearly 3 decades? How do you know when something is truly embedded versus when it will unravel the moment when you walk out the door?
That's a great question. Very good question. So, the last probably couple of years that I was there with the organization, I started thinking about that. And as I did the work throughout the decade that I was in the role, it was very important to me that we were embedding it into our culture strategies, embedding it into our business strategies, commercialization, R&D, marketing, et cetera. And so we worked really hard to answer those questions. who are we leaving behind and why? And the impact that it's having, either from an internal employee standpoint or an external customer patient standpoint. And once it became clear to individuals and professionals that it was really, really important that we think about it from that perspective, then it was easier for people to grasp. We really worked very, very hard was the employee resource groups. And we called them employee business resource groups. And making sure that they were doing things that were contributing to the well-being of the employees and the business and the organization. And when I started in the role, the employee resource groups were primarily in the United States. And when I left the role, for almost about 300 chapters of 10 employee resource groups. And a majority of those chapters were outside of the United States and Canada. So that really was a legacy that I am so very, very proud of, because we truly, truly embarked on a journey to say we need our diversity and inclusion strategy to be global in nature. That's what it became. There are a lot of initiatives and strategies that are still in play. You know, I celebrated a year this in July of being in my next leg of my chapter, and things are still going strong. They're still valuing employees. They're still treating people with dignity and respect. They're still integrating and looking at the culture. Who are we leaving behind and why? They're still trying to make it a more inclusive culture. There's a sense of belonging in every country. They're looking at their business and saying, what patients are we leaving behind and why? And really making sure that they're understanding that and studying that and doing things about it. Leveraging the innovation and the creativity of a vast variety of people across a variety of different identities as well to drive their business. It's all still there, and I'm proud that I was able to have some type of an impact.
And talking about impact, Celeste, that is something, I mean, you already introduced it, where you did learn a lot of the importance of topics of equity, naming from your dad and from your father. So I think your expertise in diversity, equity, inclusion isn't only about the results of decades of research, strategy, boardroom battles. It's very personal. Now you're in a consulting, like we are as well. And just now looking into our own experience, we talk a lot with tech companies and small, medium-sized business sectors where female leadership is particularly still far from norm and not like what it is in big corporates. If you're in your consulting work of today, what you see a balance or further, is there already some more interest based on the change of maybe then the generations within the leadership of those companies? Or is it still something being the only person and the only expert then in the room who's talking about things?
Yeah, I think from a gender standpoint, there's definitely been an increase in the representation of women in C-suite roles. Are we where we should be? No. But there's been an increase. And so it's something that we still need to keep working on, looking at the organization and making it a culture and an environment where women feel valued and a sense of belonging, valued for what they bring to the table, their intellect, their experience, their functional skills and capabilities, all of those things. And we need to get past the belief, the myth that women are only in these roles because a particular company needs to reach a quota. And that's not what it's about. It's about understanding the roles, the skills, the capabilities, the experience that are needed, the strengths, and understanding that those requirements can be embodied in a variety of different identities. And so going out and making sure that you are filling roles with some of those different identities, and you're not going to be compromising the level and the quality of the candidates that you need in the role. And I think once we understand that and get away from that bias and that myth, and understand that quality candidates come in a variety of different identities, then I think we'll more progress.
That's a perfect bridge to the next question. What would you say to a head of HR in a mid-sized European company who believes that their organization is already inclusive because nobody has complained?
Oh, yeah, you can't go by that. You have to really dig into understanding the organization because people may not be complaining because there's a fear of complaining. There's a fear of elevating voices. And so I always am wary of a quiet room. A quiet room is, to me, an indicator that things aren't all right. Because if things were all right, people would be able to elevate their voices and give both positive and constructive criticism and feedback on what's going on within the organization. They wouldn't have a fear of doing it. All you would have to do is ask the question, and the hands would go up, and the dialogue would begin. But when you ask the question and there's quiet and silence, then that's an indicator that there's a challenge there. Because first of all, people don't feel comfortable speaking up. So you need to get underneath that and understand it. And as I said, going beyond the culture surveys where you're looking at data and really having focus groups and skip level meetings and lunches and really delving into the conversation and the dialogue with individuals within the organization. So that's what I would say to an HR leader that says, well, we don't have that problem because we don't have anyone complaining.
It's amazing, and already a very good hint to all the P&O/HR leaders out there listening to us right now. If there is silence, then don't lean back and don't feel comfortable. It's the opposite way around.
Absolutely. Let's talk about your book, and it's called The Truth About Equity. And the subtitle is What It Really Is, What It Isn't, and Why Everyone Wins When We Get It Right. So let's start with what it isn't. So, what is the most dangerous misconception about equity that you encounter in organizations today?
Well, one of them is when you are bringing in diversity within your workforce. Because diversity is simply differences in people, those you can see and those you can't see. And so when you are trying to have a diverse workforce, brings in cultural and different identities, but also different perspectives and creativity and innovation. But when some people have the bias that when you do that, the standard of the qualifications of the role, and you're only hiring someone because of their identity. And that is not what's happening. So that's a myth. And as I said, skills, capabilities, strengths, experiences, etc., those can be embodied in a variety of different identities. The second thing that is a myth and a bias that people have is that you're giving preferential treatment of one group over another. And that's not what's happening. You're trying to make sure that you're giving people what they need in order for them to succeed, in order for them to have access to opportunities that others have naturally. So it's not taking something away from one group, giving people in other groups that are missing out, that are not able to have activities, to give them those opportunities, meeting them where they are and providing getting rid of those obstacles and barriers that are in the way and providing them with whatever it is, resources, education, development, etc., to help reach their aspirations. So I'd say those are the two probably biggest myths that we see.
And this is just now a couple of minutes where you explain it. everybody who's interested in learning more will directly link to your book, which is totally amazing. And you can order it everywhere, Amazon and all the other bookstores. So we'll link it here in the show notes. And if you're interested in getting in touch with Celeste directly, we'll have then a link to your LinkedIn profile as well. And people are always welcome getting more insights into this. Maybe let's take that into something potentially uncomfortable, at least for those of you who are now listening outside of Europe. In January 2025, a series of executive orders signed in Washington effectively directed federal agencies to DEI programs. And within weeks, companies, including major banks, retailers, tech firms, some of which had spent years publicly championship inclusion, started dismantling their DEI teams, removing targets, renaming programs, going silent. Now we are in mid-2026, and the rollback has at least continued, and some of that even accelerated. Now my question is there a meaningful distinction from your point of view, Celeste, between companies that held the line and those that folded? Or was that just largely a question of who had built something real versus who had built something just symbolic?
I think you answered your own question. It is absolutely that. We saw, especially in 2020, the pandemic, it was a perfect storm. The pandemic where people were sheltered in place and the world was coming to them through their televisions, through their laptops, iPhones, etc. Then we had the murder of George Floyd, which was news not just in the United States, but globally. And you saw the protesting. And then you started to see companies, I like to say, from underneath the covers and the hoods and saying, maybe we should be doing something around this. So they hired a chief diversity officer, didn't provide resources, didn't provide funding, didn't provide a staff, and said, look what we did. Or there were, on social media, there were a lot of statements of solidarity, all of these things that started cropping up. And many of that was performative. So when the executive order came out and it was written like, you can't have a legal DE&I. And so a lot of companies that didn't truly understand, didn't truly do the work, and where it was more of a check the box and performative, didn't truly embrace it, didn't embed it, then it was easy for them to handle because it was like Legos. I don't know if they have Legos in Europe, but you could break it and pull it off because it wasn't integrated. It's like trying to pull the arteries out of a body. If it's embedded, you can't do that. You can't do it. You can take the earrings off, if it's not embedded, but you can't take out something that is truly embedded within the organization. And the companies that had and understood the essence of what diversity, equity, and inclusion were and how important it was to their employees in the labor market, when we talk about the war on talent and the demographics and change globally, and then also to their businesses. It creates a competitive advantage because you connect, no matter what industry, you need to understand your customer base. And your customer base is extremely, extremely diverse around the globe, especially, if you're a global company. So the companies that understood that still continued the work. They made sure that they weren't doing it illegally and excluding people, but they were still doing the work. And, we have to make sure that we're following the law. And the law says that you don't discriminate based on a number of protected classes, based on race, on gender, on capability, on sexual orientation, religious, et cetera. And so that is the law. That's been the law since the 60s. And it continues to be the law. And so organizations, as I said, that understood exactly what diversity, equity, and inclusion was and the importance of it to their people and to their business, they continue doing the work. Now, some may have called it something different. They may have called it, belonging and inclusion. the work was still being done. You started to see evidence of that when the shareholder proposals were coming out across various different Fortune 500 companies around trying to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion within the company. And they were being voted down by the shareholders almost unanimously. And so you see that. And these are global companies. And another aspect too is, especially if they're a global company, this was something that was happening in the United States. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You need to make sure that you're continuing the work you need to be doing across the various different countries where you do business, and following the local laws in that country, but continuing the work, inclusive work environments, et cetera, for your employees in your organization.
Perfect. Thank you. So you created the Equity in Action model for managers. It's a series of self-paced online modules built around 6 leadership actions. What are those 6 actions, and why managers and not just leadership teams?
Yes, I created those. It's very, very interesting. The model is in my on my website, and I created them because it was really important that people understand that you have to not just think about people, but you have to make sure that you're looking at systems. What's happening around the organizations. You're assessing, looking around and saying, okay, what am I observing? What's happening? What's not happening? Who seems to be left behind? What's going on from the standpoint of the people, policies, practices, procedures? What's happening from the standpoint of, the business strategies? And so you're assessing, and the model goes all the way through to from assessing to making sure that you're aware and putting activities in place, elevating your voice. An idea is in your head is simply an idea in your head. It is not something until you act on. And so once you're doing the assessment, you're acting on it, and then you're also elevating your voice. And if you're not just elevating your voice for yourself, you have to elevate it for the people who haven't felt empowered to elevate their own voice. And so you're elevating your voice, you're empowering others around you so they can feel that they're seen, they feel valued, and they can contribute to whatever it is that your mission is and your vision is of your organization. So empowerment is very, very, very important as part of it. So it's 6 steps, and it goes from access to advocacy to awareness to elevating your voice and all the way to empowerment. And it's something that is very, I'm a very pragmatic person. I'm a realist. And, theory is good. It's good to understand theory. It gives you a background and a context to understand why you're applying something. So the theory of the case is important, but also equally important is implementing it. So the Equity in Action model is really important because it's pragmatic and easy for managers to implement. It's not, pie in the sky, theoretic, consultant speak. It is pragmatic, every day. These are the things that you can, after you watch this module, you can lead and implement with your teams. And that's what it's meant to do. And so we can change organizations from the inside out, one manager at a time.
Can you share a specific leadership action that seems small but has an outside effect?
Oh gosh, yes. A lot of leaders and managers, and people would be surprised about this. I know from a generational standpoint, it's so funny. People are surprised about it. Some of them, they don't meet with their teams on a regular basis. Like they'll have a staff meeting, maybe, when something comes up, or once in a quarter or once every 2 months or so. And they never never or rarely meet one-on-one with their individual team members. Now, a manager who's really good is probably listening to this and saying, you got to be kidding me. Really? But yes, it's true. And something that every manager and every leader can do is you need to understand your team members. If you want to maximize the performance level of your team, that starts with understanding the individual team members. So meeting one-on-one, finding out their strengths, their areas for development, so you can assign them projects that are going to help them to shine, but also help to develop them as well. You understand their life experiences, the obstacles and the barriers that are getting in the way of them being able to reach their true aspirations. And so once you do that, then you start to build and bring things to them that are going to help them to succeed. You're also, when you do that, you're building trust with that employee because they're now starting to see, you see them, you're listening to them, you value their opinion, you want them to succeed. So they're going to be more inclined to give you that discretionary effort as well and not, oh, it's 5:00. I'm at home. I'm not even thinking about this place when I go home. Bye-bye. So you're doing all of those things at the same time that you're meeting one-on-one and having those very valuable conversations with them. So once you do that, bringing the level of the performance of that individual, you're bringing up the level of performance of the team and subsequently of the company, because that's really, really important. So I think that is something that is very simple.
True.
Many managers and leaders, they just don't do. And when I say meeting with them, it's not, oh, let's have lunch and talk about the conversation where you are honed in on that individual to understand them and understand what you need to be doing as a manager and leader to help them. That's what I'm talking about.
I love that. And I love that pragmatism in just trying to get things done instead of theoretical 120 PowerPoint pages long discussions.
You've been there, right?
Yeah. We know that stories, unfortunately. But talking about 120 PowerPoint pages, I can still see the faces of CFOs. And whenever they're reviewing then the budgets of diversity, equity, inclusion, or sustainability, where we came from, there is always then that big question, which is, show me the return on invest. What's then
ROI.
and for
Yeah.
me? And I mean, you wrote in your book that inclusion isn't a moral luxury, it's a business imperative. So that goes exactly into that angle. Maybe you can just explain it a bit further and what you would just answer and what's the strongest argument maybe in front of a CFO.
Yeah, I would point them to and sit them down with the chief marketing officer of the company. And I'd say, let's talk about your marketing strategy. And this is marketing 101 that every university student learns when they major in marketing and take marketing courses. Understanding your customer, understanding the market segmentation, understanding and studying and assessing which customers are not buying your product and why. And once you understand that, you put a strategy together to close that gap between your marketing strategies and your customers. And because when you don't, you're leaving market share for your competitors. They're taking advantage of it. They grab that market share. They grab that segmentation of the market. They grab that customer, and you don't have any more. It's easier to get market share from an untapped market than it is to try to grab it from another competitor. So you're leaving it on the table. You're leaving revenue on the table. And that's what I would say to a CFO. Let's go have a conversation with your CMO. Yes. And another aspect too on the people side is, one of the things that's really important, the people that are within the organization, the employees, they, you hired them because they have functional skills and capabilities that are going to help you. So you're sitting in that same, let's go back to the marketing example. The marketing team is sitting around a table and they're trying to get into a market. They're losing share when it comes to their female customers, for example. And so as a female, you walk into the room and you come there because you're a strong marketer. You understand marketing. So your functional skills and capabilities are a strength, but also you're a woman and you can talk about it from a woman's perspective. Well, the reason why is Y and Z. So you can bring your culture and your experiences, your life experiences to the table and talk about being seen and heard and feeling valued when you can bring your whole self into the workplace. That's what I mean when I say bringing your authentic, not that you can wear shorts and flip-flops, that you can bring your whole self, your functional skills and capabilities, your life experiences to help to solve challenges that the business may be facing.
It's eye-opening. Not come as you are, meaning in shorts and flip-flops, but the person who you are as a character. That's amazing. Thank you.
Yes. Our listeners include people in work councils, HR departments, and sustainability teams who often want to act but feel blocked by the senior leadership or by budget. What can someone in the middle of an organization do right now without waiting for a top-down mandate?
Oh, that's a great question. Excellent question. And I would get that question a lot. I'd like to say that everyone is a leader. Just because you don't have direct reports, everyone is an individual leader. There are people who look to you because they respect you. So, for example, the vice president meets with the people in the organization and lays down some strategy or some initiative. And people, they're looking up and they're listening. But then later on, they turn to you and they say, they said this, but what do you think about it? What are your thoughts? And that's someone who has a sphere of influence that is pretty powerful. And it doesn't make a difference where they are from a levelism, from a standpoint in the organization, but your sphere of influence is very powerful. And so you can impact change as a result of that. When I was working, I would work very strongly with our employee resource group because they had a sphere of influence that was very powerful. People listened to them. They respected them. And they were part of, any type of organizational change that we were implementing. We would go to them to, how do you think this is going to be received with your constituents? How can we make it better if it's something that we had to do? How can we make it better? How can we roll it out so it's more palatable to our employees and getting that feedback? So I would say to that the person who thinks that just because they're not a manager or a supervisor or a leader with direct reports that they can't influence, you absolutely can influence because people listen to you because they trust you and use that trust and use that respect in a way that you're able to influence and create a culture that you want to see and that your peers want to see, a culture of inclusion, belonging, feel valued. If you're sitting in a meeting and it's not your meeting, but you're there as part of the team and you see that one of your team members is over talking another team member and that team member's trying to get their thoughts in, you can interject and say, well, Andrea, I think you were trying to say something when Tom was talking. What was it? You're not treating anyone disrespectfully. You're basically giving her an opportunity to say and contribute to the meeting. And you're not the boss. You just want to hear what she had to say.
Love that.
Because it might enhance the discussion. So, there are lots of things that you can do. Ever feel that you are not important enough because you are important enough. You provide valuable input. Like I said, surveys that happen, fill out those surveys because your feedback is important. If they call for focus groups, volunteer for those focus groups. If you have employee resource groups, volunteer not just to be a part of the resource group, volunteer to lead a chapter if there's no chapter in your country. But these are all things that you can do to help to create that culture that everyone, I guarantee you, everyone wants to see within your organization, no matter what the country.
That's amazing. And thank you very much for that advice. I mean, that is hopefully giving a lot of people out there a positive emotion about doing something and not just feeling unimportant. So talking about yourself, you left Merck and you did build your own ecosystem now, a consultancy, 2 books, an online course, a nonprofit. So if I'd listen to that, I mean, most people retiring meaning to slow down. You accelerated massively. Why? What's the
I wanted to be able to spread my wings a little bit more because it became quickly apparent to me when I was in the role. I think I was in the role just a few years, I guess. And I knew that it was not just a job for me. It was my calling. And about 4 years ago, I started really thinking about what does my next chapter look like? I wasn't exactly sure when I was going to be making that move, but I knew that I was going to continue to keep doing this body of work because it was so needed. And, there's a point in time when you feel like you need to come out of the nest, spread your wings, and really, as I said, take this fight to the streets.
And I can.
I felt that it was time for me to. I was getting to a point where there were a lot more messages that I wanted to get out there and a lot more people that I wanted to reach beside the 75,000 that were within Merck and MSD. And I just felt this overwhelming need to contribute on a larger scale, on a global scale. I began preparations and doing that from a financial standpoint, from a legal standpoint, getting all of the LLC and all of those things in place. When I decided it was time, and I wanted to that I was ready to do that from a fundamental standpoint. And it came time where I said, you know what, it's time. And when it's time. It's time to move on to your next chapter. And so for me, the calling, that was part of the calling for me, was moving on and being able to do this on a larger scale, elevating my voice globally and being able to really relay messages that I think are necessary in the world today.
And I can only 100% agree. I mean, I heard that call as well just a bit more than 2 years ago. And exactly like I said, when it's time.
Yes.
Just a quick question, maybe with a quick answer. What surprised you the most about running your own practice? Things that are harder, things that are maybe better. I'm just curious because I do have that same type of experience as well. But I would love to hear you.
It's interesting. You learn the difference between when you had a corporation, you were representing a corporation and you had this huge budget a budget. I don't know how huge it was, but when you had a budget, certainly more than what I have now, and people wanting you to do this and wanting to do that, etc. And you understand people who valued you as an individual and what you bring in your voice versus they valued the corporation. And so there was that piece of it. And then there was the piece of, someone said to me, she's been an entrepreneur for decades. And she said to me, you're going to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince. And I didn't fully understand a year ago, but I fully understand now. You get all of these different marketers and companies and people coming at you that want to sell you things because you're an entrepreneur. We can do this. We can do this, and our program does. Oh, why? That sounds like a good idea. And then you try it for a little while, and it's like, oh, this isn't a good idea.
wipe it off next?
Trial and error and experience and learning, and I'm still learning a lot.
So Celeste Warren Consulting works with organizations across different industries and sectors. Who is the client you most want to reach, and who is the client that needs you most but hasn't called yet?
Well, I'm not going to say the actual names of companies, but I think the companies that need the type of work that I do, those companies that I was talking about that were more performative and were not putting things in place that were embedded into the organization. So I think that's something that I think they need. They may not think they do, but they do. And they're losing business as well because they haven't understood that. They're losing market share to their competitors, et cetera. They're losing from the standpoint of turnover in their organizations, leaving in drones, and they don't understand why. So I think those are the companies that really need to be paying attention and saying, maybe I should have a conversation with Celeste to get a better understanding of how I create that culture within the organization. It is more inclusive and gives people a sense of belonging and feeling valued. How do I embed that into people, policies and practices, et cetera? So I think those are the companies that may not understand it, but and then the companies that I've been very fortunate to be able to work with, companies that they understand it, they understand the importance of it, they know what it is and how it contributes to their success, and they want to take it to the next level, and leverage my experience to be able to do that. I would say to you, organizations out there that haven't embarked on this journey and haven't truly embedded it into your people's strategies and policies, and also your business as well, that, just give me a call and reach out and we can have the conversation confidentially. Another thing too is when I look at the values of an organization, their fundamental values. So they say that, we treat our employees with dignity and respect. We want everyone to feel valued. If that's a core foundational a pillar of your company, and people don't see it embodied in your people, policies, practices, procedures, your business, and there's a disconnect, you also need to give me a call. People, they can see that. If you keep spouting and talking about the company's rich tradition and there are principles, but then people don't see it in everyday practices, they don't hear it from leaders and supervisors on that third shift, they don't see it in the behaviors of people, then there's a problem.
Definitely. And if you now wonder how to reach out to Celeste, again, we put the direct contact data into the show notes. Also, if you just open the show notes in your favorite podcast tool, you'll find the contact data to Celeste. And I'm 100% sure that there will be companies and people reaching out. And as you already said, this will be confidential. Nobody will know about it unless you want to. So thank you very much for that hint.
Let's jump to our tradition for the show. Celeste, every guest contributes a song. And what is your pick or your track that belongs to your own transformation?
I like the old song that Fadden and Whitehead, Ain't No Stopping Us Now.
Oh, yeah. That's a very good one. That's wonderful. It matches perfectly to what we've spoken about. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Gorgeous. And we don't have it on the list yet. We're starting now. This is episode 44 or 45. And we are starting now to get somehow double mentions. So, but this one is a rare and a unique pick. Thank you for that. There.
Okay.
Lovely. Another one, which
You're
is
creating your own playlist, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. We have our playlist. So if you listen on Apple Podcasts, then you'll find it directly linked
cool.
to Apple Music. And this is then the playlist for every season and for every episode. We have then that overview, and the playlist for season 2 has started already. and you will find your song then there as well. We have another tradition, Celeste, and this is that each of our guests is offering a small, immediately actionable impulse. And we would like to ask you then for that favor as well, something which is maybe relevant for what you've spent most of your career with and what you're now talking to and what you bring up to the table. So what would be one thing our listeners could do this week, something concrete, something pragmatic, something that takes less than maybe 10 minutes or something, but that shifts how they show up in their teams or in their organizations?
I would say pick up the phone and set up your meetings with your direct reports, one-on-ones. If you haven't done that before, or if you don't do it very frequently, start doing it more frequently. Because research has shown, I can't remember where I read this, that shows that the more frequently that you meet with your team, the more successful the team is. And it shows data that shows that. And so I believe it wholeheartedly as well. So that's what I think everyone can do. Take the 10 minutes to set up the meetings so you can go and do those things that we talked about.
That's amazing. So prioritization of conversations, real conversations, that is something. And I mean, coming from the digital world, as we are talking right now across the Atlantic, this is always very easy possible.
Yes.
It's not about traveling, not about a lot of time and effort. If you'd like to spend just half an hour a virtual coffee with someone, that's always possible. And I 100% agree with what you said. It's about conversations. It's about a direct connection between people and not just on a piece of paper or an email. Thank you for that. We'll give it a try ourselves, Anthea.
Yes, exactly. So last question. What gives you hope right now? Something concrete, a conversation you had, a company that surprised you, or a person you met?
You know, what gives me hope is, and this falls with my nonprofit, Destination STEM, where we're trying to get students that interested in STEM-related fields, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And what gives me hope is when I talk to this new generation of students and young people, this Generation Z. They are, first of all, the most diverse generation that we've ever seen across the world. The intersectionality of different identities is so apparent in them. Their perspectives are so just idealistic, beautiful. They truly want to make the world a better place. And I truly believe that they're going to do that. That's what gives me hope. They give me hope, because in talking with them, I feel that hope. I feel that power that they have, because they're not afraid to elevate their voices. And such young people, when you see that, it just gives me so much hope.
That's amazing. That's a positive voice about Gen Z. In some of the cases, mostly stereotyped and in wrong directions. So thank you very much for that. And as we are at the full hour already, time flew by. I can't believe it's just already an hour gone. Celeste Warren in One Day in Transformation. Celeste, strategist, author, founder, someone who has never once accepted the argument that equity is too expensive, too complicated, or too political. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for your time and for that conversation, which will definitely stay with me, with us, and with a lot of listeners out there. I hope so too.
Well, thank you for the invitation so much.
And see you next time to One Day in Transformation.
And if that episode shifted something in you, share it. Not for the algorithm, but because the right ideas and the right moments need to change. And this is something which we can share, and transformation requires understanding. So thank you very much once again, Celeste, and looking very much forward then talking to you soon and having a lot of conversations. And if you are out there listening right now and you'd like to be part of One Day in Transformation, you'd like to be a guest, would like to participate, or you know someone who should participate, please let us know. Please share with us in the comment section or within social media. Reach out directly to us, and we are more than happy. And that's exactly the way like we met first as well, Celeste and ourselves. And now we are here, and an hour has been passed. So thank you very much again, and looking forward then talking to you soon.